Good evening, everyone. We are now in the book of Daniel. We're in chapter 9. We left off yesterday in verse 17. By way of review, I had wanted us to bear in mind the nature and the special construction that we can read of the prayer of Daniel called the Tefillah. It is very interesting because it's unlike most modern prayers. It began very simply by really addressing God. And the Jewish prayers is not about asking 100 things. The Jewish prayer is very respectful of God and comes to God like you come to a king. And so when you seek the king, you don't ask him for 100 things. You ask him for that one thing, and it's presented in a way that it is for the king to see the importance of something that is important to him, as well as he is the only one who can do it, and leave it at that because the attitude and the perception of a prayer is an adoration and a confession towards who God is. There is a very important attitude that we have learned that throughout the entire body of the prayer is very much one acknowledging the character of God, being just, being merciful, being kind. He's righteous. He is right to punish us because, and Daniel says, no, we have sinned, we have khata, did our mistakes, wandered away. We have not listened to you. Everything that Daniel was saying was an acknowledgement that they really have done wrong and they have not listened to God and they deserve it. Basically, with a humility of heart, and more importantly, a contrite heart, a broken heart, where he presents himself before God that everything God has done is right. The punishment is rightfully done. We've not listened. We've not listened for so long. We know and we remember that God yourself, you have taken us from Egypt and brought us into the land and has given us your instructions, but we have failed to listen. Now, when it came to verse 17, where we left off, I had highlighted to us that it is about seeking God's face. The style of prayer is very much like the Eastern father, very stern. And the child really wants to ask something from the father. And his actions is very much to look at the father's face before doing something. And the reason they do that, or the child does that, is because he is trying to seek approval. Should he? Should he not? Will it be okay? Will the father be happy? Is the father smiling or is the father sulking or very angry? So, all of this is the imagery that's presented in this prayer. It is seeking God's countenance, seeking God's face, very much like the Aaronic blessing that the Lord will smile on you, will lift up his face upon you. But in verse 17, Daniel presents it this way. It is not that they all don't want to go back to Judah and Jerusalem, they do. But the approach that Daniel had taken is that he is seeking God in this form. Listen to our prayer, that is tefillah, and is pleased the supplications. So this would be the introspection, and by introspection is self-judgment, which is the confessions, and to his pleas, which is the supplication. We call it supplication in the English because Daniel is praying on behalf of all the Jews that are there in exile and anticipating to return back to the homeland. And after reading the book of Jeremiah 25 and 29, he is shocked that they are still in Babylon. So, what happened? So, in this prayer, he only has one request. Please tell me what's going on. For your sake, Lord, let your face, again, the countenance, shine upon your sanctuary, which is destroyed. And so he turns around and presents a case. Going back to Israel, going back to the land, it's not because they all wanted to. Of course, they wanted to. But the way that Daniel presented, it's not because of them. They are here because of the exile, and the exile was because of their Chata, their Avon, and their Pesha. Three categories, including Russia, which is to stray away. So these are all categories of offenses that God could not stand and remove them from the land. This is important because it is their foolishness and their errors of their ways that led them to this point. But Daniel looks at God and says, you know what? Your house, the sanctuary, your temple, it is destroyed. Smile on it, look upon it graciously, that you want us to go back to rebuild the temple. That's verse 17. That's verse 17. It's to turn it around such that the request that Daniel is making is all for the glory of God's temple, the sanctuary. It is desolate now, it is destroyed, but to rebuild it again requires God to send them home. We now look at verse 18. This is not an and then, it is a statement that he is making. The idea here is to implore. I think implore is a good word, is to plead to God to listen. And it begins this way. It says, Elohai, my God, my Elohim, I think if you want to call it that way. Then begins a series of very graphic words. Incline your ear and hear. Now, this idea here is and here is important, or and then here. You can say that and then here. What does that mean? Incline your ear literally means stretch out your ear. Stretch out. And when you stretch out your ear, you can actually hear better, catch the sounds, catch the words of what I'm saying. So this is very much an A and a B. To incline your ear, to stretch out your ear, to extend the ear, and to listen, that is very much the same thing said twice. Now, as it goes on, it says, open your eyes and then see. And then see. And so we have this, and then see. And then this is another A and then a B. So what's the difference? These are all very poetic way of speaking, isn't it? Open your eyes literally means from a shut eye, from a shut eye to an eye wide open. That's open. Open your eyes and then see. Now, the idea of see literally means perceive, right? Perceive. You can understand what's happening. You can have a vision to inspect. And so in Genesis chapter 1, to see is to inspect, to observe. Because the eyes is open, then you can discern. This is what Daniel is saying. See what? See that we are desolate. This idea here is shockingly destroyed, or can say stunned, shocked, shocked. Our state of shock. Why is the state of shock? The temple is destroyed. And then you see the city of Jerusalem, which is called by your name, is destroyed. It can't be, because we were saying God rescued them from Egypt with a mighty hand, and the nations around Israel was so scared of Israel, not because of Israel, but because of what God can do. And then in verse 16 and 17, Daniel says, now they're being mocked. Where is your God? Why are you in Babylon? Did your God leave you? And that kind of mocking was very sad. And Daniel is asking God, look at your city that is called by your name. Jerusalem is a city that is called by God's name. When you see Jerusalem, you see God. It is the capital of the nation. It is the capital of the world, so to speak. God has put his name in Jerusalem. That's what it means. Jerusalem is called by your name because God placed his name in Jerusalem. And so in Jerusalem is where he put his house. That's where the temple is. And so that's where Daniel prays towards. Even though there's no temple, he's praying towards Jerusalem because it is the city which God has placed his name. Now, this may not be significant to us today, but in the eyes of the nation of Israel, it is to signify a divine appointment, that Jerusalem is significant because God placed his name, and so everything needs to start at Jerusalem. The gathering must be in Jerusalem. The temple, the house of God, is in Jerusalem. And so Jerusalem is a significant place. Although it started off as a stronghold of the Jebusites, David conquered the city and it remained as a capital of the entire nation of Israel, both north and south. And at the end of the day, only the south of Judah. So he is talking about this city of Jerusalem. But notice what he is saying. He is saying, we are not presenting our pleas, our supplications before you based on any merits of our own, but based on your great compassion. And this is where we begin to understand Daniel. He takes the posture, he takes the position that man is nothing. He is praying on behalf of the Jewish people, but this prayer is not based on what the Jews had done. In fact, they have done nothing. They've done everything to deserve what they have today. So it says here, we are not presenting our pleas. Please is supplication. He is not praying and asking because of our own merits. Means what? It means that it is not because of our righteousness or justice or righteousness. Basically, Daniel is saying it's not because we have done great things. It is not because we have done good things. It is not because we are so obedient. It is not because of anything good that we have done. We are asking based on your great compassion, your great mercies. And this word is from the word racham. Raham is, I guess, is the idea of kindness, of compassion, of mercy, of pity, of how a mother deals with her child in the womb. Because the word Raham comes from the word womb. And asking God that regardless of what they have done, remember them as a child in the womb. That's great compassion. Because the mother doesn't hold back to give good things to her child. And so whatever the mother has is given to the child to let the child grow, let the child have a chance to survive. So the prayer of Daniel is based on God, God's great compassion, God's great mercy. Verse 19. Verse 19 says, Adonai, hear. Adonai, forgive. Now, understand this. We use this word here is to listen and understand what we say. But this word forgive comes from the word salak. And the idea of salak, yes, it's forgive and pardon. It's about send away. Whatever we have done wrong, send it away. That is what it means. And of course, it gives us the modern understanding of a pardon, of forgiveness, of sending and lifting one out of a debt. So that's the idea of pardon. And then he says this, Adonai, give attention. This one is listen. This is to give attention. Listen carefully, incline your ears and listen closely. Now, this is not about telling God that he can't hear properly. It is about appealing to God that this is what we have to say. Please listen. Please listen. So please hear. Please forgive. Please listen closely. And then he says here, and take action. Now, this word here, and take action, is and then. After you hear, you forgive, you listen closely, then you do this. That's what it means. Do this. And then the additional words says this. Do not delay. This is what comes after. Take action. Do not delay. The idea of do not delay literally means do not hold back, do not wait. I think that's a good way of looking at it. Do not delay, do not wait. Don't wait anymore. Of course, Daniel and the people are anxious to return home, so don't wait. And then his appeal is very interesting. His appeal is always for your own sake, my God. It's God's sake. It's for God's purpose. Why? What is God's purpose? Because of your city, Jerusalem, and your people, Israel, are called by your name. And since they are called by your name, do not let them be mocked any longer. This is important because it is to save face, right? To save face. In the Eastern world, face is very important. And while they are being mocked, they feel that it is time that God should not let this continue because it's been 70 years. And he is looking at your city, Jerusalem, and your people, Israel, who are called by your name. These are important statements which many of us do not appreciate. Jerusalem is the city of God. Israel is the people of God. You know, Exodus chapter 19, a special treasure above all other nations. They have a special place in God's plan. Jerusalem is God's city, where God placed his name and put his house, his sanctuary, on the mountain, Mount Zion. And all of these are really to present the posture that it is not what we have done right. It is what who you are. Have mercy on us. Forgive us. And don't wait. Urgently act on it because 70 years have passed. We're still in Babylon. And that is how it's been presented to us. That is why the Jews spent a lot of time studying this passage, right? Studying this passage. Verse 20. Verse 20 says, Now I was still speaking. In the prayer, he is doing a verbal prayer and praying, speaking and praying. So we have speech and then we have introspection. We call it prayer, but it's really introspection, confession, admission. Then he says, and uh, confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my plea before the Lord God in on behalf of the holy mountain of my God. Now, all of these are very interesting words that as I was speaking, I'm the one who is speaking. I'm the one who is praying. I'm the one who is confessing. I'm the one who is admitting my sin and the sins of my people, Israel. And I'm the one who is presenting my supplication. So confessing and presenting my supplication. This word presenting supplication is I fall down to present. So this word present literally means I am actually falling down. I'm falling down to present to God my plea. So these words are missing in there. To the face of God. So looking for God's face. Remember it part of this prayer. For on behalf of the holy mountain of God, everything is about God. The holy mountain or the special mountain is Mount Zion and is God's name there where the temple of God is. So while he was doing this, now we are also given to understand when he says, Well, I was speaking and I was praying, it gives us the connotation that there is much more here than meets the eye, that is not written down. So Daniel is still praying, but what was he saying? We don't know. But he was still saying, and while he was still saying, something happened. Something happened. We continue with verse 21. It says, While I was still speaking my speech in prayer, meaning this is verbal introspection. Now, I keep using the word introspection in prayer as the word prayer is because it is not asking God for 300 things. It is really to know that they don't deserve all these as they come to God the King. But they are seeking God's favor because of the name of God on the city, the name of God on the mountain, the name of God on the people. And then suddenly something happened. The man Gabriel. Gabriel is the name whom I had seen in a previous vision, which is in chapter 8. He came to me in my extreme weariness about the time of the evening offering, the mincha of the offering. So now let's take a quick look at this. The man Gabriel, this is the angel. Although it is stated the man, the ish, the word ish can also be read as a leader, but he is in the form of man. That's how Daniel will see Gabriel. He's not floating around with two wings flapping around. He is seen as a human being, look like a human, but he knows it's not a human being. I had seen in the visions, and while I was praying, the angel came. Remember in chapter 8, Daniel was asleep, right? And so he saw Gabriel there. Now, Daniel is praying. And as Daniel prayed, the angel Gabriel came to him. That's two very different events. And he remembers that he has seen him in that vision, in that dream before. And this time round, it's very special. There is a face to face meeting between Daniel and the angel. He came to me in my extreme weariness. Now, this word here, extreme weariness, is quite interesting. It's not really, it was lifted in flight. This word here is not extreme weariness, but it really means uh in in flight, I think. In flight approaching me. And I think uh we need to translate this a little bit. This is approach me in flight. Now how he moved, we don't know. But there is a notion of flight. So he didn't walk into the room. He came, he kind of flew in about the time of the evening offering. And so this is what is missing in the text, that the angel Gabriel flew into his presence. So that would be the way we read this. In verse 22, it says, and then after he showed up, and then he instructed me, and that is wrong. This is not instructed me. He enabled me to understand. It is about understanding all these complexities. Why are they still in Babylon? And then he spoke with me. And then you see all these consecutives, right? And then he actually said this. It says, Daniel, and calling him by name, I have now come to give you insight with understanding. What basically Gabriel is saying, I have come now to give you insight. to give you the skill in understanding. It is all about understanding. Bina, to build up his knowledge with insight. So this is about building knowledge. When he understands, he will have more knowledge. And so the angel is coming to say that I am going to enable you to understand all these things that you don't understand. And it's so important. Now, I want us to take a break now because we have some very important passages to deal with next week. And we will spend our time to look at it in detail. But the reason why I want to stop now is so that we know that whatever comes in verse 23 all the way to the end has a lot to do with how Daniel is to understand this. And how did he understand? Not how do we understand. Really, we don't care how we understand it. We should understand the text from how Daniel would understand as Gabriel explains all this. And so we need to really dwell in the Hebrew language a little bit more, but we also want to see that the translation, I'm using the NASB today, we will also use the ESV so that you can actually see how differently the English translations can be, especially when it comes to the last few verses of chapter 9. And with this, I trust that we have a much better understanding of prayer. That is all about God. It's not about what we want, it's about what God need to have. It's about what God will be glorified with. It's about the name of God. It's all about God. And so the purpose of the Jews is because of God. It's not because they are there to enjoy themselves and they're asking God for whatever they want. Not that. They are here to serve a purpose, and the prayer, the introspection, and the supplication to God is to position themselves to fulfill God's desire, God's face of approval upon the city, upon the sanctuary, and upon the people in Jerusalem and Judea. And so, with this, we should have a much better way of thinking about God when we think about prayer, about introspection. It's a lot about who we are and why we don't deserve it, that we must obey God to do what is right by God, that He has a mission to send these Jews home. And this is Daniel's prayer. So, with this, we come to the end of our session today.